Yeah, amazing. So me and Brandon are going to lead the conversation today. Really important conversation for our MAC athletes. So I already introduced myself, but I can introduce myself again. I'm Amy Jenkins. I am a player on the McMaster soccer team and a soon-to-be graduate of the Bachelor of Commerce program here at MAC. And I'll allow Brandon to introduce himself.
Oh, thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon. I'm in my 4th year of communication studies. I play for the men's basketball team, and just very excited to hear some wisdom and get some insight today from these great leaders.
So I will do a quick, or actually Brandon's going to take the first introduction.
Oh yeah, for sure. So one of our panelists that we have today is Sean Van Koughnett. He's an Associate Vice President and Dean of Students of McMaster University. So we're super excited to have him here today.
We're also excited to have Sheereen Harris on the call. She is our Equity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism Lead at Athletics and Recreation. She is also a PhD candidate in the Department of Kinesiology.
We also have Adam Cunningham, Sales Manager at Cintas Corporation. So with that being said and the panelists being introduced, I'd love to pass it back off to Amy to start us off with our first question of the night.
So our first question is for the whole panel, and that is just, if you could take a few moments to walk us through your career journey and then how you arrived at where you're at today, and just give us a background. And I'll hand it off to Sheereen first to start, so I can, so you guys don't have to kind of point at each other.
Sure, this is a fun one. I wish I wasn't first because I still feel like I'm very much so in the middle of my career trajectory. So like it was said, I'm currently a PhD student. And in terms of how I got here, I've always been a very curious person. So I remember back to my 4th and 5th year of my undergrad, sitting in classes and just thinking about all of the papers we were reading and the future directions and thinking, oh, like it would be really cool to look at this or look at that. And I fundamentally just love learning and love asking questions. So that led me to pursue research. And my very first exposure to research was actually looking at positive development in university student athletes, something that hit really close to home as a varsity athlete at the time. And eventually that led me to MAC, where I currently study exercise and health psychology. So a little bit different from the sports psych world, but I wasn't entirely ready to close that chapter of my life. So I looked at ways that I could still be involved with sport, which led me to coaching here at MAC. So I have the privilege of working with athletes on the men's football team as their speed coach. And in light of that, I eventually ended up as the EDI, one of the EDI leads in the department. So definitely not linear, lots of twists and turns. And like I said, I still feel like I'm very much so in the middle of figuring out my career trajectory. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light.
That's awesome. It sounds like you kind of just followed your passion, which is definitely what a lot of student athletes are looking to do.
I'll go second if that's all right, Sean. So I think I was looking for, I wasn't sure when I graduated which direction I wanted to go, very much similar to Sheereen in terms of being in the middle or hopefully on an upward trajectory still and not on the tail end of my career journey. But I was looking for an organization where I would be able to try new things and have growth potential and a company with a strong culture. And so found Cintas. Conveniently, there was a location in my hometown in Newmarket. So I was able to enjoy mom's cooking while I started my new career journey. And really the roles that I've had I don't know, 8 or 9, was able to have a rotational program and then move into some different roles. Really the results kind of spoke to the roles that came in sequence. Was able to move around a little bit geographically. Spent some time in Eastern Canada and in New England. And that's really been the track record has been results based and culture based, and being able to influence others. And certainly my time as a MAC athlete and team captain really helped in shaping who I am and what I've been able to achieve in my career. Happy to be here.
All right, I'll step in here. Similar to Sheereen, my path has been winding a little bit longer now than Sheereen's is, but through university. So I was a varsity athlete at Waterloo. Mac, I think, was my second choice. I know that was my first mistake. But no, actually, Waterloo was a great experience. Loved going to Waterloo. Played on the national team program basketball in the summer. So I graduated after 2 degrees at Waterloo with really no practical work experience. And not many companies were looking for somebody who could shoot jump shots. So it was actually quite difficult for me to transition. And I happened to step into a temporary role at where my girlfriend worked at the time, just through a personal connection. And I was taking a job to make ends meet, to pay the rent. And from there, though, it was a small company, and I worked my butt off, and there was more work than people. And I found ways to prove myself, and eventually stayed at that small company for about 5 years in the private sector. And I was using my writing skills. I was doing marketing writing. I was doing technical writing. I eventually got into some sales and marketing roles. So I did a bit of everything in a small company. And then an opportunity opened up at the University of Waterloo in their fundraising area as a major gift fundraiser. And so I thought I could use some of the marketing, sales, communication skills I had to jump into that role. And actually, I didn't get hired to the first fundraising job I applied to. They turned me down, or I didn't get it. And then the second time around, I did get a similar role in another faculty. So I stayed at Waterloo for 12 years, and I was fortunate enough to have, in a big organization like Waterloo or like Mac, there are lots of different areas you can work in. So I worked in fundraising. I was an assistant registrar for a couple of years. I was a director of one of the business units that did all the marketing and printing for the university. And then I transitioned more into student services. I started a program for student entrepreneurs at the University of Waterloo. And then I started what's called the Student Success Office at Waterloo. And so that positioned me about 8 or 9 years, it would be 9 years ago now, when I applied for this role at Mac, which for those of you who don't know, it's Dean of Students is looking after most of the non-academic student stuff, is the way I describe it, trying to provide a great experience for students. So that's everything from athletics and recreation to the Student Wellness Center, to housing, to the Student Success Center, student accessibility services, and things like that. So I had no plan coming out of university. Maybe I should have, and I didn't have much practical work experience, but the journey kind of took me here as I just pursued different challenges and tried to gain skills along the way.
Oh, Amy, I didn't know if you wanted to wrap.
Yeah, no, those are all really, and I feel like you guys all have very diverse backgrounds in terms of where your roles are and where you are today, but it's definitely interesting to hear kind of understanding that graduating, you might not come into your career or the exact position, but you definitely learn some skills along the way, which is definitely good to look forward to. And Brandon can take the next question.
Yeah, so I just want to say as well, like, thank you all for letting us step into your shoes a little bit and just see your journey and just how it got you to this very point that you're in right now. The next question that I'd love to ask the entire group is, what is the biggest challenge that you face in your career, and how did you overcome it, and what did you learn from it? We can start with Sheereen again, just because that's how the cookies crumble so far. So Sheereen, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Just because it feels right. That's it. So in terms of the biggest challenge in my career thus far, I would have to say COVID and doing research on human participants in a time when that just felt impossible for the past 2 years. So yeah, as a person who's studying exercise and health psychology, all of the work that I do is with people, with humans. It was done in person, experimental methods, which just stopped very abruptly, like we all know. So as a person still trying to graduate, I have a dissertation to write, I have data to collect, I had to find a way to keep it moving. So I was able to pivot the majority of my dissertation to collect data in a way that allowed for remote participation. So using and leveraging different technologies and learning a lot of things in a very short period of time, driving around Hamilton frantically, dropping things off at people's houses as a way to accommodate this kind of challenge. And I think you were asking, like, how did we overcome it? My answer is people. I work with really great people. I have a team of undergraduate students who I work with who help keep the research running. My supervisor is fantastic. My lab group is fantastic. So there's been a lot of problem solving, a lot of troubleshooting. Even to this day, I was having some issues with sending e-transfers to paid participants, all of these things that I didn't really have to think about 2.5, 3 years ago. So yeah, I'd say COVID definitely made my life exponentially more difficult among everyone else's, but particularly in the research professional setting that I'm in. But with the people that I have supporting me, I was able to find a way to keep it moving and hopefully graduate on time.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, definitely interdependence is always the key. Working with people makes everything always easier. And as athletes, I know a lot of us can resonate with that, just being on teams and whatnot. So I can definitely see how that would help. Adam, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. One of the transitions that I made in my career was from a sales rep. So you're in an individual contributor type of role into an operations leadership role at another location. And so if you're in, private or public sector, a lot of times you're taking on roles where it's broken. And you're taking on a team that isn't in the greatest shape. And some of us have had some of those experiences from an athletic standpoint as well. And so it was really, challenging from a work ethic standpoint, lots of hours, but in terms of hiring and finding the right people and getting the thing turned around, took a little while longer maybe than I expected to get it going, but was really gratifying in seeing the team turn around. But that was a real gut check, because you kind of controlled your own destiny as a sales rep in terms of how hard you work and the results you get, and then all of a sudden you have a whole team of people that you're responsible for and their well-being. So that was a big challenge in my career. And then to build on Sheereen's point, COVID has provided a wave of challenges. So in terms of you think about selling Cintas's product, which is uniforms and workwear and things that other businesses need. All of a sudden those businesses shut down. In Ontario was obviously significantly affected from a commerce standpoint, made it challenging, and we had to get on the Microsoft Teams thing, Zoom thing, figure out how to present to clients. And then more recently has been some of the inventory delays. So whether you're buying a Louis Vuitton purse or a bunch of shop towels or floor mats or hand sanitizer, there's been some real challenges there in terms of the world, in terms of getting your hands on the things that you need to be successful. And so that's been a trying time. But the interesting thing, to Sheereen's point, the solution has been the people. But for me as well. So I work in an organization where there's tremendous urgency, tremendous positive discontent. It's part of our culture, and regardless of the product or service, if you have the right people, as Sheereen mentioned, then you're destined for success.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll copy Sheereen here. I mean, COVID, the last 2 years, so trying to help lead an organization like MAC. Obviously none of us knew what was ahead of us back 2 years ago, and to try to figure out and make decisions that are going to impact 35,000 students, thousands of employees, those students' educations, not knowing what direction the pandemic's heading, and also no matter what decision you make, there's going to be, in some cases, loud voices that disagree, no matter what you do. And so that was extremely challenging, to say the least. It was draining. The thing that made it possible was, again, the people. And I'll say what allowed me to persist through the challenges is actually getting away from work. So I had to get off Zoom, and when I had any spare time, it would be, how do I get outside? How do I do some physical activity, even though the gyms are closed? Like, that was, if I didn't do that, the next day's Zoom calls were waiting, and just mentally, emotionally, I wouldn't have been there to try to lead people, because when you're in a leadership position as well, you're responsible not only for people you're serving a lot of people. You're serving, in my role, students, but also the people that work, in my case, in student affairs, where you have to be there to try to explain what's happening, explain decisions, try to keep morale at a point and hope alive for people, through some very trying times. So to do that, you have to take care of yourself. It's that old analogy around, when you get on a flight and they tell you to put, if you've got a child with you, you put on your mask first so that you can put on theirs. So you've really got to focus on taking care of yourself in those trying times.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you for all the answers. It seems like the common denominator is just having people and not only people, but like good people around you that are going to uplift you, especially through a trying time like COVID. So I think that would be a lot of people's common answer as far as the biggest challenge to overcome in their careers. But thank you all for your answers. I'll pass it back off to Amy.
Yeah, so my next question is specifically for Sean. It's kind of along the same notes, but it's, what is something you wish someone would have told you earlier in your career? I know you said you had a bit of a kind of curvy path. Is there anything a piece of advice you wish you found out earlier?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I think I said in my first answer, I struggled a little bit after my athletic career was done, because I just, the common refrain is, find or follow your passion or find your passion. Well, my passion was basketball and I wasn't going to the NBA. So now what? And at that point, not many Canadian basketball players were playing pro at all, even in Europe. So it wasn't a common career path to keep pursuing that passion. So I wish someone would have said, listen, if you can pursue something you're passionate about, great, but really find something you're interested in. Interests can develop into passions over time. They might not be a passion in the beginning. So did I grow up when I was little? Did I say I want to be a dean of students? No, that's not what I said to myself. I didn't say that, on into early adulthood either. But as I became interested in different aspects of my work, that led me to this point. And I am passionate about what I do. So I think that if I could, convey one piece of advice that I wish I had and that others I think should consider, it's what are you interested in? You might not be extremely, you don't wake up thinking about it all the time. You're not necessarily, it hasn't developed into a passion, but it could, because it holds your curiosity, it holds your interest, and you gravitate towards it in some way. So I think there's lots of work out there that will do that. And if you don't have that, it makes work a lot more difficult. You can persist more if there's interest there. Passion comes and goes. It's more of a flame that can die out, but interest, I think, is something that's more sustainable.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That looking for that interest that might be more of a slow burn, but you kind of learn a lot along the way and you realize that, yeah, it can grow into a passion. That's a really good point. Because obviously we all love sport as student athletes, but for many of us, it's not actually kind of viable past our university career. So finding what elements you can pull from sport into your career is what we're looking for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to extend the question to Adam, Sheereen, if they had a differing answer as well, because I'm just curious to hear if they had a different insight on that question. If not, we can go on.
Go ahead, Sheereen.
No, I was just going to touch on something that Sean said in terms of like finding your interests and then developing them into a passion. And I think particularly like you were saying with student athletes, we're so focused on our sport and just dominating on the court, on the field, on the track, in the pool, wherever. And then when it's done, it's kind of like, well, what next? Do I really feel like I'm set up for this? And one of the things that has kind of helped me to reconcile with next steps was to kind of peel back what's involved in sport and high performance sport that we love so much, and then find ways to apply that to my professional career. So as a track and field sprinter, I spent my 5-year university career in one of my races for a difference of less than 0.5 of a second. Like that's a lot of effort towards something that a lot of people wouldn't notice or recognize. And so I think of that in terms of research. A lot of people don't really see all the work that happens behind the scenes, but you're always kind of pushing towards something. So like, what is it about sport that you love? Is it working with a team? Is it being a leader on a team? Is it goals? Like what really is it about sport? We love sport, but why? And pushing yourself to go a little bit further. And I wish kind of having someone coach me through this process, maybe then I would have realized how much I do love research and I would have committed to a PhD 10 years ago. But yeah, I guess that's something I'd encourage folks to think about, or at least consider.
Yeah, both are really well said. I think Sean's comparison of interest and passion there is pretty spot on. Not much to add there. You don't grow up dreaming of selling uniforms and toilet paper and floor mats. So it's not the products that I deal with on a daily basis that dictate my happiness. But there is something in terms of, hey, generating an interest and a passion in terms of helping businesses be safer. Saving business owners money, providing them with convenient services. You develop that passion for the business and again passion for the organization, interest for the organization that. And again, you're going to wake up every day really, really pumped. Not every day, or at least I don't. There's some days that it's a little bit cloudy outside. And that during the initial transition, once you graduate, I found that was one of the toughest times when September came around after I was with Cintas for a few months. And the first September, I was in like a cave. Like I was ready to go back to school, ready to go back to Westdale, ready to have a good time and get back in the pool. And then all of a sudden that's not happening. And then the same thing happened in December, where usually you got a month off, you got training camp as a swimmer, you got all these like cool things that are happening. And all of a sudden I'm just working and I get like 3 days off at Christmas. So it was a trying time for those of you that are graduating. There's going to be maybe some tough mental blocks in that first year, because you're used to that 3-month, 4-month switch, season on, season off season. And once you get into the working world, it's a little bit different navigating that first couple of years. But by that, Sean and Sheereen, really their answers were spot on.
It's interesting because what Sheereen was talking about, looking at the elements within sport that we love, I find during the 4 years that you're actually in it, it's very hard to kind of put your head up and actually realize like what soft skills you're developing, for example, or actually reflecting on what parts of sport you like. Because like you said, you're so focused on those, maybe micro goals or team goals that you're setting for yourself. So definitely, hopefully this conversation kind of sparks that reflection for some of the student athletes at MAC. And I don't know, Brandon, if you have the next question.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Sheereen already started to kind of speak about it a little bit within her answer, but I want to ask the group, looking back at your time as student athletes, did you develop any skills that you've translated into your professional career? And if so, what are they and how do you utilize them to this day? Sheereen, I don't know if you want to elaborate on it because you already started talking about it.
Let's do it. Why not? Yeah, I think honestly, I don't think we have enough time in this session to go over how much I really gained during my time as a student athlete. Like the first couple of things that come to my mind, time management. I think a lot of people don't recognize how demanding it is to be a university level student athlete, and you're spending 20 plus hours on top of a full-time course load just to make yourself better. And sometimes that doesn't even include like the AT, the sports psych work. Like there's so much that happens beyond the scenes. So that's one of the things that I know some of my supervisors kind of comment on, like, Sheereen, how do you find the time? And my answer is always, I'm not training for 20 hours a week anymore. There's a lot of time, and even working on how you can be productive in the small windows of time you have. Maybe you have like an hour and a half between a lift and your first class, or 30 minutes between your practice and your appointment. Like you just learn to be very productive. I think working on a team is something that is that I continue to really appreciate, particularly from track and field. It was an individual sport, but we were all still working towards a common goal. So how can I be the best version of myself to support what other people are doing in terms of my research team or the students that I supervise? I think grit is something that I've been thinking about a lot within the past couple of years. It's not a matter of if I'm going to do something, it's how, and how I'm going to allocate my time and effort and energy and resources into being the best researcher that I can be, the best mentor that I can be, the best student that I could be, and finding ways to kind of problem solve and overcome so many different challenges. Yeah, I could spend countless hours talking about this, but I'll pass it on to Adam and Sean to maybe add a little bit more.
Again, not much more to add. I had grit and drive in terms of the first two words that come to my mind. I think the time management thing is absolutely on point as well. But the grit thing, Sheereen already hit. The drive piece, the really cool thing about being a high level athlete is that you are trying to do something better than you've ever done it in your life. and I've talked to a couple, people at Mac about this, and you miss it. You miss it when you stop. But that drive of doing something better than you've ever done it is not that common, right? Like there's not that many other people that get to say that on a regular basis. And so that drive that comes from it, whether it's swimming or running or shooting or whatever you're doing, field, court, ice, that just, to me, like that fire continues to burn. And then it carries over into your professional life, which serves you very, very well in my experience and working with other varsity athletes.
I don't have a lot to add. I agree with what Sheereen and Adam said, but the ability to perform under pressure, and whether that's so academically and or athletically, depending on what line of profession you go into, and just in just about any job, there is pressure there to perform, and if you're able to do that successfully, and that's how you create opportunities for yourself. Because one of the things I didn't appreciate when I was a varsity athlete and shortly after graduation was that not everyone can do that. I just assumed everyone could because the people I was surrounded with were similar, and we were all driven and focused on performing under pressure. But that's a skill, and that's a skill that's really valued in terms of your development in a career. So that's one thing that I'm thankful that I was able to develop in part by being an athlete and a student athlete.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Like, I love that question because I feel like a lot of student athletes that even will be viewing this and just trying to get any wisdom off of it, always kind of like in the present time, you don't really realize a lot of the stuff that you're doing, kind of like what Sheereen was saying with the 20 hours of training. But once you actually step into, like, I guess, the real world, quote unquote, and you don't have those obligations anymore, it almost seems like you have more time than the average person. So it's interesting to look at that and kind of realize some of the skills that you actually get from it once you're looking at it in hindsight. So thank all of you for that. Adam, the next question was actually directed for you. So just for some of the people that might be going to like apply places and just trying to make the best impression on like some of their employers, what are the most important qualities you look for in a future employee and why?
Yeah, I think a lot of the qualities we just talked about that come from being a varsity athlete are the ones that then correspond to what I'm looking for. So the ones that Sheereen hit on: time management, grit, perseverance. When you're looking at applying to jobs, I look through a lot of resumes, right? We're actively staffing all the time. I see hundreds and hundreds. My advice to those that are looking at career opportunities is when you're looking on your resume, make sure it speaks to your results. Make sure it speaks to what you achieved, not what the job was or what the degree was. Like you've got probably some tremendous results to talk about, and that's really, really important. It's one thing to do something, one thing to swim laps or play basketball, but it's another thing to have results in those respective fields. So the grit piece, culture piece. There's some core, components of our corporate culture that I'm looking for in terms of, again, I've mentioned professionalism and positive discontent, not being satisfied with the status quo, attending to urgent matters, whether it's customer related, client related, school related. So a few different things there would be some of the core competencies that I'm looking for when I'm hiring into a role at Cintas.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's just valuable information flat out. So thank you for that. I know I'm going to keep that in the back of my head. So
be ready.
Yeah, Amy, I'll pass it off to you next.
Yeah, so the next question is what makes a great leader? And this could be a manager role or coach that you're thinking of. But I think through COVID, we've even seen great leadership and what leadership may look like. So what kind of qualities do you guys think make a great leader? And I'll make Sean start so Sheereen can get a break from being the first one.
All right, yeah, we could have a whole session on this question alone. So I'll just maybe mention a few things that are top of mind. I mentioned before, a leader who seeks to serve. Sometimes, you know, when especially the younger we are, we might think of leaders as the person who, you know, is above everyone else, tells people what to do. It's not that at all. It's actually the opposite. And when you think of an org chart, you know, the leaders at the top, you got to flip that around and put them at the bottom. Them, him or her, or them at the bottom, so that they're there to serve others and say, okay, how do we help this organization succeed? How do I help the people who we're serving, and the people who are working here succeed? What do we need? What resources do we need? What incentives do we need? And what direction do we need? So I would say that servant leadership is important. And the second thing I'll mention is just integrity. People should feel that whoever is in a leadership position, they can trust, and what they say is there's no hidden agendas, and they follow through on what they're talking about. And the third thing I'll actually mention is, you know, leaders, we shouldn't view that as a job title either. And so this isn't precisely answering your question, but it comes to mind as I talk about the org chart and flipping that upside down. Anyone in the organization can exhibit leadership and leadership qualities. And so that integrity, that orientation towards service, those two things, I think if every employee has that in our organization, if you've got a collection of leaders, you're going to have a strong organization. So those are a few things that are top of mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not always the loudest person in the room that might be the most effective leader. I think that's definitely something to keep in mind. Adam, you take the question next.
Yeah, really similar themes. So I would say the first one, you know, tying to the integrity piece that Sean mentioned is do what you say you're going to do. So that would be one. And then 1A is right on that servant leadership piece is you need to provide what your partners or what your employees or what your athletes or students, what they need, not necessarily what they want, but what they need, right? And whether that's resources, training, empathy, tough love, like it could be a whole list of things in terms of what they need. But if you provide them with what they need, then they'll be successful. And just like, you know, many of you have had world-class coaches, they didn't always tell you what you wanted to hear, but they told you what you needed to hear, and they provided what you needed to perform at the highest level. So pretty similar themes to what Sean mentioned.
Yeah, I feel about the same. There's not too much to add. The one thing I did want to add was that in my eyes, I also see a leader as someone who's really good at encouraging the strengths of the people that they're working with or working around. And I think it speaks to what's already been said about servant leadership and just finding a way to work with people instead of always just kind of being at the top, giving people orders. You know, if you're really good at something and I'm not as good at it, how are we going to use this? How are we going to work together? Are there areas that you want to grow? How can I, as a leader, support your own development within the scope of this role or even future roles that you're interested in? So it really should be this very collaborative and innovative like experience where everyone's learning and everyone's growing together. And I think the leader is just one of the key pieces of bringing out the best in people and supporting people who want to continue to grow and develop for the organization that you're working with, but also just for the personal development and trajectory of your colleagues.
I think that's an amazing takeaway. Like a leader definitely learns from the people that they are leading just as much as the opposite. So I think that's a good point. Brandon can take the next question.
Yeah, I actually want to ask. So I know we speak about being leaders a lot, but for anyone that's viewing that wants to work on becoming a leader, what ways do you think they can go about doing that? And is it something that you believe is you're born with it, or is it something that you can actually attain? Whenever anyone can answer, I'm not gonna.
All right, I'll take a swing. This is one of the tougher questions. So I feel like going first is We'll see. We'll get the conversation started. I think there's steps you can take in terms of what I mean. You first have to lead by example. So you can't just wake up tomorrow and be like, well, I'm going to be a leader on this team. If you're talking about being a leader on the team you've already been on, you've established a lot of your brand already. So like that's earned in terms of your work ethic and your punctuality and how you treat others. So if you're talking about becoming a leader on a team that you're already being a part of, then that comes with the blood, sweat, and tears that you've already put into it. But in terms of developing leadership skills and that piece of it, the mentor piece, right? We've got a formal mentorship program within the sales organization at my organization, but picking up a younger athlete, inexperienced athlete, maybe someone in your class, or someone if you're working then someone professionally, you don't all of a sudden have to have a responsibility of 10 or 12 people. You can influence one and then like start from there, right? Have a positive influence on them and then grow your influence from there, right? There was that movie with the kid, right? That like pay it forward or whatever, right? And you just pay it forward, like help 2 or 3 people, and then grow your influence gradually. So to me, it really depends on the circumstance. You get a fresh start, fresh school, right? Sean comes into Mac, no one knows what he did at Waterloo. He can start from scratch, but so there's different situations from a location standpoint, from a company standpoint. But those would be a couple takeaways that I have on establishing your leadership and establishing your brand.
I can add a bit there. I definitely think leadership is something that you can develop and also grow into. I know, speaking from my own experiences, for maybe like 2 to 3 years of my undergrad, I don't think I would have considered myself a leader, even though I was a team captain for 4 of my 5 years. So back at York, after every season, they nominated people to be captains, and then the team would vote. And all of a sudden, in my second year, I was one of 4 team captains for a team of 80 plus people. I had no CIS medals. I had no OUA medals. I didn't even make an OUA final. I came 9th, and I was very upset. So I was really confused, like, what are these people seeing in me? Because I'm just showing up. I'm just trying hard. But I think, like you were saying, Amy, it doesn't have to be the loudest person in the room. And like Adam was saying, like, what are these little things that you can do? I have a positive attitude. When I see people down, I try to bring them up. I'm always there late, putting away the hurdles. Like, I'm showing up when you don't have to show up. You're going above and beyond. And again, like trying to pull out the strengths of other people. If I can't win a medal in my second year, how can I support you so that you can win a medal? So one of the things I would encourage people who are earlier or even later in their own leadership journeys is a lot of self-reflection. What kind of leader do you want to be? What are the traits that you need to have to get there? And then what can you do? What mentorship can you seek out in order to further grow and develop your own leadership? Because leaders can look very different in terms of what they have to offer and how they ended up getting there. So yeah, figure out what your leadership model is and what you want to do, and just have these conversations, but don't sell yourself short. And yeah, believe in yourself, have a bit of confidence, and you can surprise yourself, would be what I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree. Everybody has some element of leadership potential. Certainly some will have more than others, just like any other skill. And to Sheereen's point, everyone will have their own leadership style. There's not one style. Some will be the more stereotypical leader who's out in front and maybe a little louder than the rest, and that's fine. Many others, I was as a student athlete, I was pretty quiet and introverted, and I led by example. And I was captain of the team for 5 years at Waterloo, and it was my work ethic. I was the first one in the gym, the last one out, and so that was my beginnings as a leader. So I think it's really about developing yourself as a person, and to Sheereen's point, reflecting on who are you and how are you going to develop your strengths. And one of the commonalities of whether you're the out in front leader or the quieter leader or anything in between is all the good leaders that I've encountered, they care about the group that they're with. They care about the people that are in that group, and they care about the success of the group. And I think if you reflect on some of your teammates, I think you'll find that common element. The best leaders are the ones, and the reason they're cleaning up after the events is because they care. And that translates into the working world as well. When I think about the best leaders that I've encountered at Mac and at Waterloo, it's the ones that truly, genuinely care about what they're doing and the success of the organization above their own interests. So I think if you engender that kind of approach, that will bode well for you as a leader.
Yeah, it really sounds like the character comes first, and then the people around them notice you as a leader maybe before you notice yourself as a leader. And I definitely resonated with Sheereen's story. I was in a similar boat on the soccer team. My final year, I was the captain, but in my first year, I was definitely not the star player. And I definitely just put my head down and worked hard. And I was not, looking at myself as a leader, but it's interesting as that shifts and as your character grows throughout your career. It's really fulfilling, and it's definitely something, leadership is definitely something that, like, when you do experience it in a positive light, it does really feel good. So I think Brandon has the next question.
Yeah. So Sheereen, we just love to ask you the next question. Can you name a person who has been a tremendous impact on you as a leader, and what and how did this person impact your life? And thank you, Monica. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I could spend hours talking about all of the people who have influenced my life, and I still couldn't narrow it down to one. But specifically, when I think about my experiences through sport, there's two names that kind of jump out for a similar reason. So the first one was my coach. His name was Tony D'Agostino, but I only call him Day or Dags. He was actually my high school coach, the reason that I switched from soccer to track and field, and then he became an assistant coach at York for my 5 years. So he was with me for my entire track and field career. And then the second one is Bart Zemenik. So he was the manager of varsity sports, some title like that. He was administration in the athletics and rec department when I was at York. And I think the reason that these two individuals stand out to me in my journey was because of, like I was saying, I didn't really see myself as a leader for a lot of my undergraduate career. And I always had these two louder men in my ear saying, you can do this. And they really worked to help me develop confidence in myself. They would never accept anything less than my absolute best, but whatever my best would look like on a given day. So some days you're just not feeling it. You're not having it, and life happens and things happen. And what I really valued was that these two people were always able to kind of work with me, support me, but they always would push me to want more for myself and to push other people. And by pulling me up, I think they realized that I could pull my team up and pull a program up and really help so many of the student athletes that I was around and engaged with. So yeah, I think I'm eternally grateful for the experiences I had with these two people, just kind of to help me imagine myself as a leader and want to be better and push me to be better. So yeah, I can't give you one. I can't do it.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, it's so nice having influential people in your life that can really kind of show you the light within yourself that you might not see in yourself. I'd love to extend the question to Adam and Sean as well. It's just such a great question. I'm sorry, I have to. Whichever would like to go first.
I can go. Yeah, so the coach who recruited me at Waterloo, his name was Don McCrae. He's retired now for a long time. He was the national women's coach at one point, and he was the first person in my parents' house recruiting me, which made a big impression. And he, as a young student athlete, my main weakness was my confidence. I couldn't see the potential that I had, and he brought that out in me. He used to both push me in hard ways, but also build me up in ways that just talking to me about look around you, look at what you can do, begin to compare yourself to others. And sometimes comparisons aren't good, but in my case, it actually helped to go you're right. If I look around the league or the country or whatever, there's certain things that I felt that I could really compete well in that sport. And I also had my sights set on the national team program as well. And he really helped me build the confidence I needed to perform at a high level. So he was really influential. And I have to say though as well, what I try to do with every leader that I work with is to observe and I take something from every leader I've worked with. In some cases, when I think back to the previous bosses I've had, sometimes I've had one boss who was the most innovative, forward-thinking guy I know. There's another boss who was the most principled person I knew. There was another president that I worked for who was the best relationship builder I've ever seen. So I think we have these influential people in our lives, but we're also exposed to a lot of different leaders. And I think as you gain experience and are exposed to different people, if you can take something from everyone and learn from it, then that's a really, really valuable. It's really valuable to do that.
I a different experience than Sheereen. I had 4 coaches in 4 years at Mac. So my examples would probably be on the professional side. I had some good relationships with my coaches, but the longevity just wasn't quite there. But on professionally, I think there's been a couple, really tough to narrow down to one, but a couple that have really helped exemplify some of the traits, that we've been talking about, right? In terms of the grit, in terms of doing the right thing, in terms of being a servant leader. There's just been some of those people that have really magnified areas where I could get better, and have really set a great example in terms of whether it's communication, whether it's making the right decision, and which is not always the easy decision, regarding personnel or regarding protocol or regarding whatever needs to be done. So there's been a couple that I've been indebted to, and not necessarily that I reported directly into, but that I had dotted lines or associations with. And in a fast-paced world, you need to make sure that you stay connected with people that you feel have a positive influence on you, right? Is that not everyone's going to call you and check in on you saying, hey, how are you doing today? What's going on? Like, how can I help you? But if you put up your hand, those great leaders will take the time. So I encourage, anyone that is trying to, get further influence from those around them that they respect and really feel like have a positive influence, put up your hand and get on their calendar and show that you're prepared and continue to learn from them. And to Sean's, I think Sean makes a great point in terms of taking something from a lot of the leaders that I've worked with. There's certainly bits and pieces, and then a couple that stand above the rest.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, it's always it's so amazing. Like I was saying before, just having someone to really bring out that light in you. I have to give Kwesi his flowers, one of my really, really good friends, Kwesi Adegoku. Because if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be doing a lot of the stuff that I'm doing right now or any EDI work as well. So I just wanted to give him a quick shout out. But yeah, thank you for the amazing answers. I'll pass this last question off to Amy. And
yeah, so this is the final question for tonight. I think we've covered a lot of the leadership skills. But the final question is, are there any leadership skills that you guys are still working on and still kind of developing? I'll make Adam start it off since we've kind of given Sheereen the short end of the stick a little bit.
Yeah. So there's a book, Capitalize on Your Strengths or something. I don't know, some book about your strengths, right? And building off of them. And so you do this quiz, and one of the things that my boss at the time, one of my top things was harmony. That's one of my strengths, is that I want people to, be aligned and on the same page. And that can be a strength at times. But one of the things that in my professional career, to be transparent, that I've had to work on is having challenging conversations. And so that happened through my athletic career. You got to have some challenging conversations with some peers, maybe with some coaches, in terms of opinions of the team, the way things are going. Especially if you're team captain, you're kind of that bridge between the team and the coaches. So, but that professionally, there's just a ton of advancement that can happen there. And so, challenging conversations has been one that I've tried to continually get better at, and it's served me well to kind of diagnose that opportunity and pursue it. I'm sure I've got a lot more that I can get better at, but that would be the main thing that I've been working on my development for the last couple of years.
I can go next. So I think the biggest thing that first, to answer your question, yes, there are always things that every leader should at any time be working on, because everyone is a continuous work in progress. But one of the things that I've really been trying to work on within the past couple of months, maybe year or a bit, has been imposter syndrome. It's that nagging little voice at the back of all of our minds that tell us that we're not good enough, and there's other people that are better and smarter and faster and stronger and doing more and better, all of that kind of stuff. And I think particularly as I approach the end of literally all school of all days, I'm starting to get emails coming in saying, "Oh, Dr. Harris." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, absolutely no, that's not me." And then I think that all that's separating Sheereen Harris from Dr. Harris is really like a 2-hour defense and a couple pieces of paper. And it's like, no, I need to start seeing myself as the person that other people are seeing me, which I think is challenging when you want to stay humble, but that's definitely something that I'm working on. And again, I have really good people around me, really supportive people that will kind of call me on this and say, like, why are you so resistant to letting people look at you as an expert or ask you for your opinions? And along those lines, with the imposter syndrome is working on trusting myself as a person who can make really informed decisions and deal with the consequences, thinking about pivoting my line of research and having many meetings with my supervisor being like, "I don't know, what do you think we should do?" And he would just say, what do you think we should do? And I'd say, "I don't know, we could do this, but maybe it's not right." And like finally feeling okay about making these executive decisions. And sometimes it's the right decision, sometimes it's not, but just feeling the confidence and knowing that I worked really hard. I've been in school for 10 years. I'm allowed to make executive decisions, even if it doesn't end up to be the best decision, and you learn from it and you grow from it. But saying goodbye to the whatever voice in your head saying that you're not enough, and just continuing to develop that confidence.
Yeah, I think those are great points that we all go through in terms of imposter syndrome at different points, no matter where we are in our career. And the difficult conversation comment, that's something I really have had to work on still. I don't know if working on it's the right word, but in most leadership positions, you're into situations where there might be friction between people, which there's healthy friction that can happen all the time. Sometimes there are ethical challenges. There are decisions in the role I'm in, oftentimes decisions that people aren't going to agree with, but they have to be made. So the ability to navigate those conversations while still maintaining positive relationships where possible, that's a skill that I constantly work on. And I'll just mention one other thing, and that's there are only so many hours in the day, and so many hours a day, frankly, that I want to work. I don't want to work 20 hours a day. And the higher up you go in an organization, the ability to prioritize and figure out what are the most important things that I should be focusing on at this moment for the organization, that's a constant daily challenge in an organization like MAC, where your calendar gets filled up with committee meetings and different types of meetings. The ability to say, okay, these are the 3 things that I have to dedicate most of my time on over the next week, because that's going to have the biggest impact. It's very easy when you get into leadership positions to get sucked into stuff that just, it doesn't, it's a waste of time. And so that skill of understanding what's important and prioritizing your time in that way, and that extends beyond work, of course, to family and friends and other pursuits. But that prioritization skill is really important as a leader.
Thank you so much for all your answers. I definitely can kind of resonate with some of those for sure. So I know the imposter syndrome is an ongoing process, and there might be checkpoints where you do feel like, okay, I've made it this far, and back then I wouldn't have believed that. But yeah, it's definitely an ongoing thing that persists. But as you said, we're all work in progress. I guess I don't know the right terminology, but I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being so open and honest and telling great stories and answering all of our questions. We hope this conversation will impact future McMaster athletes to come as they enter the real world. But thank you, Brandon, my co-moderator, for asking some great questions and really being the liaison for this great conversation.